Welcome to Study Session 9, Social Movements and Revolution in Europe. Introduction. The role of social movements in revolutions in Eastern Europe. The rise of the social movements and their actions were responsible for the transformation that took place in Eastern Europe in 1989. The course and speed of events in Eastern Europe, which have surprised everyone, including their protagonists, call for an agonizing reappraisal of the role of social movements. Objectives: discuss the nature of social movement, identify the social composition of the movement, analyze the methodology of the movement, state the factors that propelled the movement. The nature of social movements. Social movements are a type of group action. They are large informal groupings of individuals or organizations which focus on specific political or social issues. In other words, they carry out, resist, or undo a social change. The term social movement was introduced in 1848 by the German sociologist Lorenz von Stein in his book Socialist and Communist Movements Since the Third French Revolution, 1848, in which he introduced the term social movement into scholarly discussions, actually depicting in this way political movements fighting for the social rights understood as welfare rights. Modern Western social movements became possible through education, the wider dissemination of literature, and increased mobility of labor due to the industrialization and urbanization of 19th century societies. Social composition of the movement. In the West, participants are drawn predominantly from the middle class, especially the intelligents, and in the South, social movements include this but are predominantly popular or working class based. The methodology of social movements in Eastern Europe. The movements themselves were deliberately peaceful, and little or no force of arms was used to repress them, except in Romania, where armed repression by the securities was successfully countered by the army, which took the people's side in a largely spontaneous uprising. The revolutions of 1989 were made by largely peaceful social movements that sought and achieved the downfall of governments and the crumbling of state power, which they mostly did not want to replace themselves. Factors that propel social movements. Nationalism and ethnicity. Nationalism and ethnicity were also factors in all of the social movements in Eastern Europe. Nationalism, if only anti-Russian, and ethnic issues helped mobilize people into these social movements and then to define some of their demands. Economic factors. Economic, political, and other exigencies may propel the social movements in Eastern Europe in the direction of state power, towards compromises of principle and the political costs of failure in the face of impossible economic and other odds. The economic crisis, which has been expanding and deepening in Eastern Europe and the USSR, contributed materially to the desire and ability of this movement to mobilize so many people for such far-reaching political ends. Strategic and political changes. Strategic and political changes prepared new world and regional political circumstances, which also helped the social movements initiate, proceed with, and succeed so far in their social mobilization and political demands. In the USSR itself, of course, perestroika and glasnost have paved the way for the mobilization of the movement. This, in turn, are both a necessary mobilizing factor to promote perestroika and glasnost. The role of social movements in social transformation in Eastern Europe. The role of participatory social movements in social transformation requires reappraisal. It was in initiating and carrying these events perhaps greater than ever before. The movement's membership include people who were or still are in parties, even the Communist Party, and the movement's expect some of their members to become active in new parties but as individuals. Summary: social movements are any broad social alliances of people who are connected through their shared interest in blocking or affecting social change. The term social movements was introduced in 1848 by the German sociologist Lorenz von. Modern Western social movements became possible through education, the wider dissemination of literature, and increased mobility of labor due to the industrialization and urbanization of 19th century societies. Leadership of the social movements in the East has also been drawn from the intelligentsia, but participation seems also to have included people from other middle class backgrounds as well as masses of working class people. The movements themselves were deliberately peaceful, and little or no force of arms was used to repress them except in Romania. The role of party politics is downgraded, at least relatively, by these peaceful social movements and their demands for democracy. Nationalism and ethnicity were also factors in all of the social movements in Eastern Europe. Thus, economic, political, and other exigencies may propel the social movements in Eastern Europe in the direction of state power, towards compromises of principle and the political cost of failure. Strategic and political changes prepared new world and regional political circumstances, which also helped the social movements initiate, proceed with, and succeed so far in their social mobilization and political demands. It was in initiating and carrying these events that the role of the social movements was greater than ever before. We have come to the end of study session 9. Thanks for listening.